I stared at my phone screen, watching the call timer that shouldn't exist. 21 missed calls from my wife, Elena. 21 attempts to reach me while I was here, in this hotel suite, with Sienna sprawled across the bed like she owned it. 21 chances I'd ignored because I was too busy, too important, too wrapped up in whatever the hell I thought mattered more than the woman waiting for me at home. And now the calls had stopped. And that silence, that absolute suffocating silence, felt like a noose tightening around my throat. Behind me, Sienna laughed. That sharp-edged sound that used to seem exciting, but now just grated against my nerves like sandpaper. She stretched her arms above her head, making sure I noticed, making sure I remembered what we'd been doing for the past 2 hours while my phone vibrated itself nearly off the nightstand. "Is she still blowing up your phone?" Sienna asked, her voice dripping with amusement, like this was all some kind of game. Like my marriage collapsing in real time was entertainment for her Saturday night. I didn't answer because I was staring at those 21 missed calls, trying to remember the last time Elena had called me twice in a row, let alone 21 times. In 3 years of marriage, my wife had been the quietest person I'd ever known. She didn't demand. She didn't nag. She didn't make scenes at family dinners or cry during arguments. She just existed in the background of my empire, managing every detail I was too busy to notice, making sure everything ran smoothly while I took all the credit and told myself I'd built this life alone. The 22nd call never came, and that realization hit me like a fist to the gut because Elena didn't do desperate. She didn't do messy. She didn't do anything that would make her visible in a world where I'd taught her that being invisible was her greatest asset. And if she'd called 21 times, if she'd broken every pattern, every carefully maintained boundary between us, then something was catastrophically wrong. Before we go deeper, I want to know, where are you watching from? Are you somewhere safe right now? Because what happens next, it gets darker, and I need you to stay with me. I need you to understand. Let me ask you something. Have you ever ignored someone so completely that by the time you noticed the silence, it was already too late? I need you to stay with me right now, because what happens next, what Elena does, it rewrites everything you think you know about power, about revenge, about the kind of danger that comes wrapped in silk and patience. Marcus. I called myself that back then. Marcus Vaughan. The name that made judges nervous and politicians cooperative. The name that opened doors and closed mouths. The name that meant something in the dark corners of New Jersey, where power was measured in fear and money and how many people owed you favors they could never repay. I'd built an empire on that name, spent 15 years clawing my way up from street-level enforcer to the man who controlled everything from Hoboken to Trenton. And I'd done it by being smarter, more ruthless, more willing to do whatever it took than anyone else in the game. Or at least that's what I told myself. That's what I believed, right up until the moment I realized my wife had left and taken everything that actually mattered with her. Marcus, Sienna sat up now, wrapping the sheet around herself in a way that was supposed to be seductive but just looked calculated. Come back to bed, she'll get over it, they always do. But I couldn't move. Couldn't look away from that call log. 21 attempts. 21 moments when Elena had reached out and I'd chosen this. Chosen Sienna. Chosen my ego. Chosen everything except the woman who'd spent 3 years making sure I had an empire worth protecting. And I felt something cold and sick settling in my stomach because Elena didn't make points. Didn't throw tantrums. Didn't do anything without a reason. And 21 calls meant something had shifted, something had broken, something had ended. My fingers moved before my brain caught up, hitting her contact, hoping for her voice, hoping for an explanation, hoping for anything except what I got. A dead tone that made my blood run cold. Not even voicemail. Just that flat electronic sound that meant the number was disconnected. The phone was off. The person on the other end had severed the connection so completely that even trying to reach them was impossible. I need to go, I said, grabbing my jacket, my keys, my phone that suddenly felt like evidence of a crime I hadn't realized I was committing. Whoa! Sienna's face twisted with disbelief and something uglier, something that looked like panic because she was smart enough to know that if I left now, if I chose Elena over her even in crisis, then whatever game she thought she was winning was already over. You're leaving now because your wife is having a tantrum? She's not having a tantrum, I said. and my voice came out rougher than I intended, edged with something that might have been fear or guilt or the first creeping awareness that I'd miscalculated badly. That I'd assumed Elena would always be there, waiting patiently in the background while I did whatever I wanted with whoever I wanted. And that assumption was about to cost me everything. The 15-minute drive to our estate in Montclair felt like 15 hours. I white-knuckled the steering wheel, telling myself this was nothing. Elena was probably asleep. She'd turned off her phone. She was making a point. She'd be there when I got home, quiet and composed, like always ready to listen to whatever excuse I'd crafted on the drive over, ready to forgive because that's what she did. That's who she was. The woman who made everything easier, who smoothed over every rough edge, who never caused problems. Except Elena didn't make points. And somewhere deep in my gut, where instinct lived before logic killed it, I knew that whatever I was driving toward wasn't going to be a conversation or an argument or even a confrontation. It was going to be something worse, something final, something I wouldn't be able to talk my way out of. Because the woman who'd called 21 times and then gone silent wasn't the woman I thought I'd married. She was someone else entirely, someone I'd never bothered to actually see. The mansion was dark when I pulled through the gates. Not unusual, it was past midnight, but something felt wrong. The air tasted wrong. The silence had weight to it, like the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to discover what I'd lost. I pushed through the front door and called her name. Elena. And my voice echoed back at me, hollow and mocking in the emptiness. The kind of silence that answered me wasn't just absence of sound. It was absence of presence. The house felt hollow in a way that had nothing to do with the late hour and everything to do with the fact that someone who'd lived here, someone who'd filled these rooms with life and warmth and invisible labor had been surgically removed. And what remained was just expensive furniture and empty space and the shell of a life I'd taken for granted. I took the stairs 3 at a time, my heart hammering against my ribs in a way that had nothing to do with exertion and everything to do with the way my body already knew what my mind refused to accept. That I was too late. That whatever chance I'd had to fix this had expired somewhere around missed call number 12. And now I was just running toward the wreckage. Our bedroom looked untouched. Bed made with military precision, the kind of perfection that Elena always maintained even when I stumbled in at dawn smelling like another woman's perfume. Everything in its place. Everything exactly as it should be. Except when I yanked open her closet, I found nothing. Empty. Not half empty. Not missing a few things. Empty. Completely. Methodically. Surgically empty. Even the hangers were gone, like she'd erased every trace of her existence from this room, from this house, from my life. I spun toward my private safe, the one hidden behind the oversized canvas in my office down the hall. My fingers fumbled the combination twice before it clicked open, and I found the cash still there. The backup passports. The unregistered weapon I kept for emergencies. All of it untouched. But the small black ledger, the one that contained nothing except phone numbers and account codes written in Elena's careful handwriting, that was gone. And so was the biometric scanner she'd set up last year, the one she'd said would streamline access to the offshore accounts, the one I'd approved without asking questions because Elena handled the details and I handled the big picture. And that division of labor had worked perfectly, right up until the moment it destroyed me. My phone buzzed. A text from my account manager in the Caymans. Authentication failed, access denied, required credentials, primary plus secondary biometric verification. And I stared at those words, feeling reality shift beneath my feet, because that secondary biometric verification, that was Elena's thumbprint. Elena's voice saying a passcode only she knew. And without her, I had nothing. I owned millions of dollars in offshore accounts, and I couldn't access a single penny. Another text from my lawyer. Judge Richardson won't return my calls, says the quarterly consultation fee wasn't received. What's going on? And I knew what was going on. I knew with absolute certainty, even before the next text arrived from my enforcer, Danny. The Russians are sniffing around our distribution routes. You want me to reach out to our guy at the Port Authority? I don't have his contact. Elena had the contact. Elena had all the contacts. Elena had spent 3 years building a network of political connections and corrupt officials and carefully maintained relationships that made my empire possible. And I'd been so busy playing kingpin that I never noticed she was the one actually running the kingdom. I was just the loud, threatening face she put in front of people while she did all the real work. All the actual thinking, all the strategic planning that separated a successful operation from a gang of thugs with guns. My phone rang. Unknown number. And I answered without thinking, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. "Hello, Marcus." Elena's voice was soft, calm, exactly the same tone she used when asking if I wanted cream in my coffee. And hearing that normalcy, that absolute refusal to match my panic, made my skin crawl. "I imagine you've noticed I'm gone. Where are you?" The words came out harsh, desperate. And I hated how I sounded like a man who'd just realized he'd thrown away the only thing that mattered. But what was I supposed to say? How was I supposed to explain that I'd spent 3 years taking her for granted, and now that she was gone, I finally understood what I'd lost? "I called you 21 times, Elena continued, as if I hadn't spoken. "Did you know that? 21 attempts to reach my husband, to give you a chance to choose differently, to come home, to explain, to care. And you ignored every single one. So now I'm doing what I should have done a long time ago. I'm leaving. You can't just..." I stopped myself, forced my breathing to steady. "Elena, baby, whatever Sienna said, she didn't mean it. We can fix this. I can fix this. Just tell me where you are and we'll talk. This isn't about what she said, Marcus. This is about what you did, what you've been doing for months. What I've been enabling because I thought maybe you'd realize what you were throwing away. But you didn't, and you won't. So I'm making the choice for both of us." There was a pause, and I could hear traffic in the background. Wherever she was calling from, she was already far away, already unreachable, already gone in every way that mattered. "Did you know I've spent the last 3 years building your empire?" Her voice had changed now, become sharper, colder. "Not you. Me. Every political connection, every offshore account. Every piece of leverage you have on every dirty cop and corrupt judge from here to Philadelphia, I cultivated that. I maintained that. I was that. And you never noticed. You never asked. You just assumed it all happened by magic. Elena, listen to me. The accounts require my biometric authentication. I set those up." "No, Marcus. You approved them. I set them up. And the accounts require dual authentication. Your thumbprint and mine, plus a verbal passcode that only I know. And the passcode changes every 72 hours based on an algorithm I created. So even if you somehow got my thumbprint, even if you forced me to cooperate, which you won't, because you'll never find me, the code I gave you 3 days ago is already obsolete." I felt the ground shift beneath my feet, felt reality rearranging itself into a shape I didn't recognize, because this wasn't Elena. This wasn't the quiet wife who faded into wallpaper at my business meetings. This was someone else. Someone who'd been hiding behind that silence the whole time, watching and learning and planning. "You're bluffing," I said, but I could hear the uncertainty in my own voice. "Am I?" Her voice carried a smile now, and that smile made my skin crawl. "Check your Cayman account in 20 minutes. You'll find I've already moved 30 million to a charitable trust for domestic violence survivors. Specifically." I thought the irony was appropriate. The line went dead, and I stood there in my empty bedroom, surrounded by the architecture of a marriage that had apparently been hollow the whole time. Staring at my phone like it might explode and feeling everything I'd built, everything I'd fought for, everything I'd sacrificed crumbling. Because somewhere out there in the darkness, my invisible wife, the woman I'd overlooked and underestimated and betrayed, had just declared war. And she'd fired the first shot before I'd even realized we were on a battlefield. My phone buzzed again. "Danny. Boss, we got a problem. The server with all our files on the politicians, it's locked. We can't access any of the leverage. What do I do?" I looked at the 21 missed calls on my screen. 21 warnings I'd ignored. 21 chances to choose differently. And the silence that followed them was going to destroy me. Because I'd spent 15 years learning how to break people, how to intimidate them, how to make them afraid. But I'd never learned how to see the person standing right beside me. Never learned that the most dangerous enemy is the one you've trained to be invisible. I didn't sleep, couldn't sleep. Spent the hours before dawn tearing through the estate like a man possessed, checking every room, every drawer, every corner where Elena might have left something, a note, a clue, a mistake that would tell me where she'd gone or what she was planning. But there was nothing. She'd been thorough. Surgical in a way that suggested this wasn't a decision made in anger or hurt. This was something she'd been planning for a long time, maybe months, maybe years, while I'd been stupid enough to think I was the one in control. The medicine cabinet in her bathroom was empty, the jewelry box on her vanity, gone except for the diamond bracelet I'd given her last Christmas, left behind like a returned receipt, like evidence of a transaction that had been voided. And even her toothbrush had vanished, like she'd erased every trace of her existence from this house, from my life, from the partnership I'd thought we had. By sunrise, I was standing in my office, phone pressed to my ear, listening to my account manager in the Caymans stammer through another failed login attempt. Mr. Vaughn, I'm telling you, the system won't accept any credentials without the secondary biometric scan. Mrs. Vaughn set up a dual authentication protocol last year. She said it was for security purposes, and you approved it. I don't care what I approved, I snarled. Override it. Sir, that's not possible. The encryption she implemented requires both thumbprints, yours and hers, plus a 16-digit verbal passcode that changes algorithmically every 72 hours. Without her physical presence or that current code, the system treats any access attempt as a breach and locks down tighter. We're talking quantum-resistant encryption here. Military-grade stuff. I've never seen anything like it outside government systems. I ended the call and hurled my phone across the room, watched it shatter against the wall, leaving a dent in the canvas worth more than most people's houses. And I felt something ugly and desperate clawing its way up my throat. Because this was the law of dependency. This was the principle my father had taught me when I was 15 years old, watching him run his crew. Make yourself indispensable. Make them need you so badly that removing you would collapse the entire structure. I'd spent my whole life applying that principle to judges and politicians and cops. Building a network where everyone owed me something, where I was the spider at the center of the web, pulling strings. And I'd never realized that my own wife had been applying that same principle to me. Had made herself so essential to. Every aspect of my operation that removing her didn't just damage the empire, it destroyed it completely. And she'd done it so quietly, so invisibly that I never saw it coming. Never even knew there was a web around me until she pulled the strings and watched me fall. You're starting to see it, aren't you? The way Elena wasn't fading, she was positioning herself, building something so intricate, so complete that when she finally pulled the threads, the whole thing would collapse. Keep listening, because the real twist's the one that destroys everything it's coming. And I promise you, it's worse than anything you're imagining right now. My phone, the backup one in my desk drawer, buzzed. Danny. Boss, we got a situation. The Russians just hit our poker game on Market Street. Walked right in like they owned the place. Took 40,000 and hospitalized 2 of our guys. My jaw clenched. And where the hell was our protection? We pay Captain Morris a fortune to look the other way on Market Street. That's the thing, boss. Morris says he never got this month's payment. Says his contact, some woman who usually handles it, never showed up. He's threatening to pull all our protections citywide if we don't make it right by Friday. The woman, Elena, she'd handled all the cash deliveries to the dirty cops. Always discreet, always punctual, always forgettable in her designer coats and quiet smile, moving through the city like a ghost. And I'd never even bothered to learn the routes she took or the protocols she'd established or the relationships she'd spent years cultivating, because that was Elena's job and I had more important things to worry about. Except now, those more important things were collapsing because the foundation they were built on had been quietly, systematically removed. Handle it. I said through gritted teeth. Pay Morris double, whatever it takes. With what money, boss? The accounts are frozen, and the cash reserves, Elena always managed those too. We've got maybe 50,000 liquid, and that needs to cover payroll for 30 guys plus operational expenses. We're bleeding out here. I hung up and stared at the ruins of my office, at the shattered phone and the dented canvas and the empty safe that used to contain everything I needed to maintain control. And I thought about 8 years of marriage, 8 years of Elena moving through my world like a ghost, managing chaos I never even saw, solving problems before they reached my desk. And I'd mistaken her silence for emptiness, her subtlety for weakness, her invisibility for insignificance. I'd been so wrong it physically hurt. Sienna appeared in the doorway wearing one of my shirts, her hair tousled from sleep. Baby, come back to bed. You've been up all night. Elena will come crawling back once she realizes she has nowhere to go. She's probably at her sister's house feeling sorry for herself. Give her a few days to cool off and she'll be begging you to take her back. I looked at Sienna, really looked at her for the first time since this nightmare. Started and felt a wave of contempt so strong it tasted like copper on my tongue. Sienna was beautiful. Yes. Exciting in the way that new things are exciting. But she couldn't name a single judge on my payroll. Couldn't recite a single offshore account number. Couldn't navigate the intricate web of favors and threats and carefully maintained relationships that kept me untouchable. She was decoration. Nothing more. And I'd traded my empire for decoration. Elena could recite every judge, every account, every political connection from memory. Could tell me which senator preferred single malt scotch and which congressman was allergic to shellfish. Could navigate conversations in 3 languages I didn't speak and make people feel seen and valued in a way that built loyalty that lasted years. She'd been the invisible hand that turned my violent ambitions into an actual sustainable empire, and I'd thrown her away for someone who couldn't even make coffee the way I liked it. Get out, I said quietly. What? I said get out. Go home. We're done. Sienna's face twisted with shock, then fury. You're dumping me? For her? She left you, Marcus. She walked out, and she took everything that matters with her. I turned away from Sienna, looking out over the manicured grounds of my estate, the fortress I'd built to prove I was untouchable. You were right about one thing. She did go somewhere. She went somewhere I can't reach. And she made damn sure I'd feel it. Now get out of my house. The door slammed behind her, and I was alone in the hollow shell of an empire that had never actually been mine. It had been Elena's. I'd just been too arrogant to see it. The freeze happened at 3:47 in the morning. 2 days after Elena left. I was awake, as usual, scrolling through offshore account statements on my laptop when every single balance simultaneously displayed the same message. Access denied. Security protocol activated. Biometric verification required. I tried my business account. Frozen. My emergency fund in Singapore. Frozen. The shell company accounts in Panama, the Caymans, Switzerland, all frozen. 8 years of carefully laundered money, over $200 million. Locked behind a digital wall that Elena had built brick by brick while I'd been too busy playing kingpin to notice she was constructing my cage. I called my account manager, then my lawyer, then my IT specialist, a hacker named Cole, who I paid 6 figures a year to keep under retainer for exactly this kind of emergency. Cole showed up at dawn with 3 laptops and enough energy drinks to kill a horse. Worked for 6 hours straight, his fingers flying across keyboards, muttering about encryption protocols and blockchain security. Finally, he leaned back and rubbed his eyes. Mr. Vaughan, whoever designed this system is a genius. And I don't say that lightly. This isn't just dual authentication. It's quantum resistant. Encryption tied to biometric markers with algorithmic verification that randomizes every 72 hours. Even if I had her thumbprint, I'd need her voice saying the correct passcode at the correct time in the correct location. And the location changes based on GPS coordinates. She's essentially created a moving target that requires her physical presence to unlock. Can you break it or not? Cole looked at me like I'd asked if he could fly to the moon. Breaking this would take a team of NSA-level cryptographers about 6 months, maybe. And that's if they knew what they were doing and had access to quantum computing resources. Sir! Your wife didn't just lock you out. She built a fortress that makes Fort Knox look like a piggy bank. She must have been planning this for years. I paid Cole and sent him away. Sat in my office staring at screens full of frozen numbers and felt something I hadn't felt since I was 15 years old and my father had beaten me unconscious for stealing from the family store. Helplessness. Complete, absolute, bone-deep helplessness. By noon, Danny showed up with worse news. The blackmail vault, the digital server containing photos, recordings, and documents on every corrupt official in our network has gone dark. We can't access any of it. Boss. Not the files on Senator Kim, not the photos of Judge Richardson with that prostitute, not the recordings of Captain Morris taking bribes. It's all behind the same. Encryption. Elena set up the whole system 3 years ago. Said it was safer than keeping physical copies. Said it would protect us if the feds ever raided our properties. 3 years, I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. She's been planning this for 3 years. Looks that way. Danny shifted uncomfortably. And boss, there's something else. 4 of our top guys got approached by someone offering them immunity, deals in exchange for testimony about the Kellerman murder. They're talking about flipping. Who approached them? They won't say, but the offer came with details that only someone on the inside would know. Shift schedules, distribution routes, account numbers. Someone's been feeding information to the feds, and my guess is it wasn't recent. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered, already knowing who it would be. Good morning, Marcus. Elena's voice was calm, almost pleasant, like she was calling to confirm a dinner reservation. I assume you've noticed the accounts. You can't do this. I already did. She paused. Did you know I spent 6 months learning cryptography? Took online courses under a fake name. MIT-level material. I wanted to make sure that when I left, you'd understand exactly how much you relied on me. Exactly how little you actually built yourself. Elena, this is insane. That money isn't just mine. It belongs to the family, to the operation. People are depending on it. People like Senator Kim, the one who votes against health care for poor children while we pay him $200,000 a year? Or Judge Richardson, who sends innocent men to prison while letting our dealers walk free? Her voice hardened. I kept your empire running. Marcus, I maintained relationships with monsters so you could sleep peacefully at night, and you repaid me by letting your mistress answer my calls, by choosing her over me 21 times in one night. What do you want? I want you to feel what it's like to lose everything, to be powerless, to realize that the person you overlooked was the only reason you had power at all. She paused. Oh, and Marcus. The Russians know about the shipment coming in Friday night. Funny how information leaks when the person managing security protocols isn't there anymore. The line went dead, and I stood there staring out the window at my estate. 20 acres of manicured perfection. 4 luxury cars in the garage. A wine cellar worth $500,000. All of it suddenly feeling like stage props in a play I hadn't realized was ending. Elena hadn't been my wife. She'd been the architect, the engineer, the invisible hand that turned my violent ambitions into an actual empire. I'd been the face, the muscle, the loud, threatening presence in the room. But she'd been the mind. And without a mind, the body was just a corpse waiting to fall. My phone buzzed again. Danny. Boss, the Russians just hit our warehouse in Newark. They knew exactly when our guys would be rotating shifts. We lost $500,000 in product. I closed my eyes. Elena had memorized every detail of my operation. Shift rotations, shipment schedules, weak points in security. She'd been the keeper of institutional knowledge that couldn't be written down, couldn't be replaced. And now she was weaponizing it, turning every piece of information she'd gathered over 3 years into ammunition against me. I was fighting a war against someone who knew every move before I made it. Someone who'd built the chessboard I was playing on. And I was losing. Badly. The house felt hollow again, but now I understood why. It wasn't that Elena had taken things when she left. It was that she'd been holding everything together all along invisible threads, connecting every piece of my empire, and I'd never even noticed the weight she carried. Never appreciated the constant invisible labor that made my life possible. Until those threads were cut, and I watched everything collapse. I thought about 3 years of marriage. 3 years of Elena quietly, competently, perfectly managing every detail of my operation. And I started reviewing those years in my mind, looking for patterns, looking for clues, looking for the moment when my wife had transformed from partner to enemy. The charity work she'd insisted on maintaining, even when I told her it was a waste of time. Tuesday nights every week at some women's shelter or literacy program or mentorship thing. She'd never missed a Tuesday in 3 years, no matter what was happening with my business. The college friend she visited once a month, driving to Manhattan for lunch and shopping trips that lasted 6 hours. But I'd never met this friend. Never even heard her name because Elena said I wouldn't be interested in girl talk. The book club that met every other Thursday at someone's house, rotating locations. And Elena always came home with new books, but I'd never seen her actually read them. Never asked what they were discussing because I didn't care about her hobbies. The shopping trips that took hours longer than they should have. The phone calls she took in another room. The laptop she kept password protected even from me. The questions she'd started asking about my operations 3 years ago, questions that seemed like innocent curiosity, like a wife trying to understand her husband's work but were actually intelligence gathering. How many guys do you have on the street, Marcus? Which judges can we really trust? If the feds ever came after you, where would the money be safest? What's the biggest threat to the operation right now? And I'd answered every question, proud to explain my empire to someone who seemed genuinely interested, never realizing she was building a case against me, piece by piece, conversation by conversation, transforming pillow talk into evidence. The timeline was damning. 3 years ago, the FBI had renewed their investigation into my family. I'd known about it because I had people on the inside, but the investigation had gone nowhere. Every witness disappeared. Every piece of evidence got suppressed. Every grand jury failed to indict. And I'd thought that was because I was untouchable, because I'd built my network so carefully that nothing could penetrate it. But what if it wasn't that? What if the investigation had continued quietly behind the scenes? And what if Elena had been part of it? What if every relationship she'd cultivated, every digital system she'd built, every piece of information she'd gathered, had been flowing back to federal investigators while I'd congratulated myself on how well I'd trained her to support my work? The thought was too monstrous to fully accept, but it kept circling back, demanding attention. Because the woman who'd frozen my accounts and leaked my shipment schedules to the Russians, the woman who'd spent 6 months learning military-grade encryption and 3 years building a digital fortress around my money, that woman wasn't someone who'd just decided to leave her husband. That woman was an operative. I pulled up our wedding photos on my laptop. 8 years ago, Elena had been 24 years old, working as a paralegal at a small firm in Newark. I'd met her at the courthouse one Tuesday morning when I'd been there for a hearing, and she'd been filing documents for her boss. She'd dropped a stack of folders and I'd helped her pick them up. And something about her quiet competence, her careful precision had caught my attention. I'd asked her to dinner. She'd said yes. 3 months later I'd proposed and she'd accepted. My family had approved because Elena was exactly what a boss's wife should be. Educated enough to navigate social situations, quiet enough not to cause problems, beautiful enough to reflect well on me, but not so beautiful that she'd attract unwanted attention. The perfect wife. Except now I was looking at those wedding photos and seeing things I'd missed the first time. The way Elena's smile never quite reached her eyes. The way she held herself slightly apart, even in intimate moments. The way she looked at the camera like she was performing a role, not living a moment. I zoomed in on one photo. Me in my tuxedo, looking proud and possessive. Elena in her white dress, looking calm and composed. And if I looked very carefully, slightly sad, like she already knew how this was going to end. Do you feel it? That cold weight settling in your chest? That understanding that everything you thought you knew was built on lies? I'm feeling it too. Watching my marriage dissolve into something I don't recognize. And the worst part is I can't even say when it started. When Elena stopped being my wife and became something else. Because maybe she was never my wife at all. Maybe from the very first day she was always something else. And I was too arrogant to see it. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. And I knew before I opened it that it would be her. That she was watching, somehow. Always 3 moves ahead. Always knowing exactly when to strike for maximum damage. The text contained a single photograph. Elena sitting in what looked like a cafe, espresso in hand, sunlight streaming through the window behind her. She looked peaceful. Radiant even, and beneath the photo a single line of text. Stop looking. You won't find me until I want to be found, and by then you won't have anything left to bargain with. I stared at that photo until my vision blurred. The woman in it wasn't the Elena I'd known, wasn't the quiet, subservient wife who'd faded into the background of my life. This Elena was awake, alive, unburdened by the weight of pretending to be someone she wasn't. And I realized with a sick certainty that this was who she'd always been underneath the performance, underneath the role she'd played for 8 years. This was the real Elena, and I'd never met her, never even knew she existed. The Russians came for blood on a Tuesday morning. I was in my office trying to salvage what was left of my operation when Danny burst through the door, blood streaming from a gash above his eyebrow. They hit the card game on Broad Street, took everything, shot Tommy in the leg, told him to deliver a message. The Russians are claiming Market Street, Broad Street, and the waterfront by Friday. Anyone who resists ends up in the river. The room went silent. Market Street alone generated 40,000 a week. The waterfront controlled shipping access for half our operations. Losing that territory would cut my income by 60%. Would reduce me from a boss to a mid-level operator scrambling for scraps. "How many men did they bring?" I asked, and my voice was dangerously quiet. 15, maybe 20. They walked in like they owned the place, boss, like they knew exactly when our protection would be lightest. Because they did know. Elena had maintained the scheduling system which crews patrolled which territories, when shifts changed, where the vulnerabilities were. I'd never bothered to learn the details because Elena had always managed it seamlessly. Now that system was a weapon being used against me. "We hit them back," one of my guys said. "Tonight, hard. With what money?" Another guy gestured at the empty table between us. "Half the crew hasn't been paid in 2 weeks. The ones still showing up are doing it out of loyalty. But loyalty doesn't feed families. The Russians are offering double what we used to pay. How long before our guys start jumping ship?" My phone buzzed. A text from my weapons supplier. "Payment 3 weeks overdue. No more shipments until accounts settled. Mrs. Chen sends her regards." Mrs. Chen. The woman whose birthday Elena never forgot. Whose grandchildren Elena asked about by name. Who gave us favorable prices because Elena had spent years building that relationship with thoughtful gestures and impeccable cultural awareness. Another text. The police dispatcher who used to warn us about raids. "Can't help anymore. Your contact never showed up with payment. Good luck." Then another. Judge Richardson's clerk. "The judge wanted me to inform you that he's reassigning all cases involving your organization to other courts. He says the arrangement is terminated." I watched my phone light up with the systematic destruction of every alliance Elena had built. She wasn't just withholding information. She was actively dismantling the web of relationships that made my empire function. Calling in favors. Burning bridges. Making sure that everyone who'd ever helped me understood that the protection was gone, the money was gone, the reason to stay loyal was gone. "Boss," Danny said quietly, pulling me aside while the others argued. "We got another problem. 3 of our dealers got arrested last night. Normally we'd have Judge Richardson bail them out by morning, but now they're sitting in county lockup talking about flipping. They know we don't have the juice to protect them anymore. How long before the feds get involved?" They already are. I got a call from our contact at the FBI field office. Said they've received an anonymous tip about the Kellerman murder. They're reopening the case. Danny's face went pale. The Kellerman murder. That was 4 years ago. We thought that was buried. So did I, but Elena knows about it. She was there the night I ordered it. Heard me tell you to make it look like a robbery. She knows where the body is buried. She knows you pulled the trigger. She knows everything. And now she's using it. By Wednesday afternoon, the Russians had claimed Market Street without firing a shot. My crew had simply abandoned their posts when they realized there was no money to pay them. No protection if they got arrested, no future in an organization that was bleeding out in real time. That evening, I stood on the balcony of my estate, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and red, like the world was burning. My phone rang every few minutes with more bad news. A shipment seized by customs because the usual bribes hadn't been paid. A safe house raided because the tip-off network had gone silent. 2 more. Guys calling to say they were taking a step back until things stabilized. Things weren't going to stabilize. Elena had designed this collapse with the precision of a controlled demolition, and I was watching it happen in real time, helpless to stop it. Danny appeared at the balcony door, looking like he'd aged 10 years in 10 days. "Boss, we need to talk about exit strategies. The Russians aren't stopping at Market Street. They're coming for everything, and we don't have the resources to fight back. Without money, without protection, without the political connections, without Elena," I finished quietly. "Yeah." Danny leaned against the railing, staring out at the darkening sky. "Without Elena. I've been in this life 20 years, boss. I've seen families rise and fall, but I've never seen one collapse this fast. It's like she pulled one thread and the whole thing unraveled. She didn't pull one thread. She was the thread. We just didn't realize the entire tapestry was held together by her hands. A text came through, unknown number. I didn't need to check to know it was Elena, but I opened it anyway. 52 hours remaining. The Russians are calling a sit-down for Friday to discuss terms for your surrender. I told them where to find you. Choose wisely, Marcus, prison or death. At least in prison you'll live long enough to regret what you lost. I showed the message to Danny, who swore quietly and viciously. What are you going to do, boss? I looked at my estate, my cars, the empire I thought I'd built alone. All of it feeling like borrowed time, borrowed power, borrowed glory that had never really been mine at all. I'm going to do what I should have done 8 years ago, I said, and my voice was hollow. I'm going to pay attention to the woman I married. But even as I said it, I knew it was too late. Elena wasn't coming back. She was watching from somewhere beyond my reach, waiting for me to break, and break I would. Because I'd spent my entire life believing that power came from violence and fear. Elena was teaching me that real power came from knowing which threads held everything together and having the courage to cut them. The lead came Thursday morning from a private investigator I'd hired, a former FBI agent named Cooper, who charged $5,000 a day and promised results. Found her, Cooper said over the phone, his voice crackling with static. Or at least, found where she's been, hotel in Atlantic City, the oceanfront Grand. Front desk clerk remembers a woman, matching her description. Checked in 3 days ago under the name Sarah Mitchell. Paid cash, still has the room. My heart hammered against my ribs. You're sure it's her? Dark hair, early 30s, expensive taste, kept to herself. The clerk said she ordered room service twice, Caesar salad both times. That's her thing, right? You mentioned the salad. It was. Elena ordered Caesar salad everywhere we went. Said it was the only dish most restaurants couldn't screw up. I'm sending you a photo, Cooper continued. The security camera caught her in the lobby. It's grainy, but my phone pinged. I opened the image. A woman in sunglasses and a scarf, face partially obscured. But the posture, the way she carried herself, it could be Elena. Get eyes on that room, I ordered. Don't approach, just confirm she's there. Already on it. I've got a guy watching the hotel now. I hung up and immediately called Danny. We found her. Atlantic City. Get 3 cars and 8 men. We're bringing her home. Boss, is this smart? What if it's a trap? I don't care if it's a trap. We're 48 hours from losing everything. If there's even a chance she's there, we're taking it. We left within the hour. 3 black SUVs carrying my most loyal men and nearly every dollar of liquid cash I had left. Cooper had demanded another $20,000 up front for the Atlantic City operation. The crew needed payment to stay motivated. Gas, tolls, hotel rooms if we had to stake out overnight, all of it bleeding money I couldn't afford to lose. The drive took 90 minutes through traffic. My mind raced the entire way, rehearsing what I'd say when I saw her, how I'd convince her to come back, how I'd promise things would be different. We pulled up to the oceanfront Grand at 2:37 in the afternoon. Cooper was waiting in the lobby, looking uncomfortable. She's not in the room, he said immediately. What do you mean she's not? She checked out an hour ago. Left this at the front desk. Cooper handed me an envelope with my name written in Elena's elegant handwriting. I tore it open. Inside was a single piece of paper with 3 words. Checkmate, and a receipt. For the hotel room. For Cooper's services. For the private security company Cooper worked for. All paid by Elena. 3 weeks ago. My blood turned to ice as the truth hit me. Cooper wasn't working for me. He'd been working for Elena the entire time. She'd hired him to feed me false information, to drain my remaining cash reserves on a wild goose chase. You son of a... I lunged for Cooper, but Danny caught my arm. Boss, we got bigger problems. I just got a call from Tony, while we were driving down here. The Russians hit our main warehouse in Newark. Took everything. They knew we'd be gone. Of course they knew. Because Elena had orchestrated this entire play. She'd dangled bait she knew I couldn't ignore, pulled me and my remaining muscle 90 miles away, and left my territory completely exposed. I looked at my phone. A text from unknown number. You just spent $47,000 chasing a ghost. That's $47,000 you won't have to pay your crew. How many more will defect to the Russians by tomorrow? My guess is all of them. Another text seconds later. Oh, and Marcus. I was never in Atlantic City. I'm somewhere much closer, close enough to watch you destroy yourself. I stood in the lobby of a hotel my wife had weaponized against me, surrounded by men whose loyalty was measured in dollars Vas no longer had, and felt the last piece of my power crumble to dust. Elena hadn't just stolen my money. She'd made me spend what little remained chasing shadows while my empire burned. Behind me, I heard one of my guys on the phone, voice low. "Yeah, tell the Russians I'm interested in discussing terms." The defections were starting. I had $43,000 left to my name, a mansion I couldn't afford to maintain, and less than 36 hours before Elena's deadline expired. I'd been outplayed at every turn by the woman I'd trained to be invisible. Now she was the only thing I could see. And she was always 3 moves ahead. Danny had been my right hand for 12 years. Through wars with rival families, through federal investigations, through the building of an empire that stretched from Hoboken to Trenton. If I trusted anyone, it was Danny, which made Friday morning's discovery feel like a knife between the ribs. I'd come downstairs at dawn to find Danny in my office, door closed, voice low on the phone. He'd stopped talking the moment I opened the door, but not before I heard 6 words that made my blood freeze. "Yes, Mrs. Vaughn, I understand completely." Danny looked up, face pale, phone still pressed to his ear. For 3 seconds, neither man moved. Then Danny hung up. "How long?" My voice was eerily calm. "Boss, let me explain. How long have you been talking to my wife?" She called me Tuesday night after the Atlantic City thing. "And you answered?" She knew things. Marcus, things only someone on the inside would know. She knew about the Kellerman murder. She knew I was the one who pulled the trigger. She knew about the body, the location, the weapon I used. Danny's voice cracked. She said she could give that information to the FBI or she could forget it ever happened. My choice. I felt something cold and vicious unfurl in my chest. Divide and conquer. Another lesson from my own playbook. Isolate the leader by turning his inner circle. Make them choose between loyalty and survival. So you chose survival. I chose not to spend the rest of my life in prison for a murder I committed on your orders. Danny stood but kept his distance. Marcus, I've been loyal to you for 12 years, but Elena made me realize something. You're not the boss anymore. She is. She always was. And the smart money is betting on the person who actually runs the operation. I run the operation. No, you don't. You never did. Danny's voice hardened. You gave orders. You made threats. You walked into rooms and scared people. But Elena? She made the machine work. She knew every judge, every cop, every politician. She knew the account numbers, the shipment schedules, the weak points in every rival family's operation. Without her, you're just a guy with a gun and an attitude. And in this life, that gets you killed. I took a step forward. Danny's hand moved instinctively toward his waistband, where I knew he kept a weapon. You pull that gun and you're a dead man, I said quietly. Maybe, but you'd be dead too, and then what? The Russians take everything, your empire dies with you. He paused. At least if you listen to what Elena's offering, you might survive this. What's she offering? Danny pulled an envelope from his jacket and set it on the desk. Immunity for me and 3 other guys. Full cooperation with the FBI in exchange for witness protection. She's already arranged it. We testify about the Kellerman murder and 5 other unsolved cases. You go to prison. We disappear. And your organization gets dismantled. Brick by brick. I stared at the envelope like it was a live grenade. And if I don't confess, then we testify anyway. Elena's already given the FBI enough evidence to build a case. The only question is whether you confess and get a deal, or fight it and spend the rest of your life in a supermax. Danny's voice softened. Boss, she's giving you a way out. It's not a good way. But it's the only way that doesn't end with you dead in a ditch or dying alone in prison. This is what loyalty looks like now. Betraying me because my wife makes a better offer? No, Marcus. This is what survival looks like when the person who made you untouchable decides you don't deserve protection anymore. Danny moved toward the door, paused with his hand on the frame. She told me to tell you something. She said Marcus built an empire on fear. I'm dismantling it with logic. Fear makes people loyal until something scarier comes along. Logic makes them realize they were backing the wrong horse all along. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded like a coffin lid. I stood alone in my office, surrounded by the trappings of power that suddenly felt like museum pieces, artifacts of an empire that had already fallen. I just hadn't been smart enough to notice. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Always unknown now. By now, Danny's told you about our arrangement. 4 of your top men are cooperating with the FBI. You have 18 hours to decide if you want to join them or face them in court. Choose wisely, Marcus. Your deadline expires at noon tomorrow. After that, I stop negotiating and start destroying. I looked at the envelope Danny had left. Inside would be details of Elena's deal, terms of my surrender, the systematic dismantling of everything I'd built, everything I'd thought I'd built. Because the truth was becoming impossible to ignore. I hadn't built anything. Elena had. She'd constructed an empire and let me believe it was mine. And now she was deconstructing it with the same methodical precision, exposing every foundation stone as something she'd laid in place. Divide and conquer. She'd turned my inner circle, made my most trusted men realize that loyalty to me meant death while loyalty to Elena meant survival. I'd spent 12 years thinking Danny was my man. Turned out like everything else. Danny had only been on loan, and Elena was calling in all her debts at once. The coordinates came at 10 o'clock Saturday morning, a text from Elena with nothing but a location. Pier 47, Port Newark. And below it, if you want to see me one last time, come alone. You have 1 hour. I knew it was probably a trap. Knew the smart play was to ignore it, maybe even run. But I was past smart plays, past strategy. I needed to see her face. Needed to understand how the woman who'd shared my bed for 8 years could destroy me so completely. I drove myself. No crew. No backup. Just a weapon tucked in my waistband and the last shreds of my pride. Pier 47 was abandoned, had been for years. Since the shipping company went bankrupt, rusted containers stacked like a maze. The smell of salt and decay thick in the morning air. My footsteps echoed on the concrete as I walked toward the water's edge. Elena was standing at the end of the pier, her back to me. Dark hair moving in the wind. She wore a simple black coat, hands in her pockets, looking out at the grey expanse of water like she was admiring the view. "Turn around," I said, and my hand went to my weapon. She did. Slowly, and the first thing that struck me was how different she looked. Not scared, not guilty, not even angry. She looked free, lighter, somehow, like she'd been carrying a weight for years and finally set it down. "You came," she said softly. "I wasn't sure you would." "You knew I would. You know everything, apparently. Not everything, but enough." She took a step closer. I didn't seem afraid. "Did you come to kill me, Marcus? Is that your solution?" "I came for the codes, for the money, for a way to fix this." Elena smiled, sad and knowing. "There's nothing to fix. That's what I've been trying to tell you. The money is gone. Stop playing games. Just give me the passwords, the biometric access, whatever you need to unlock it." "You're not listening." Her voice remained calm, almost gentle. "I didn't just lock the accounts, Marcus. I deleted the encryption keys. Permanently. 3 days ago. The money is still there. Sitting in offshore accounts, $217 million, but without the keys, it's completely inaccessible. To you, to me, to anyone." I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. "You're lying." "I'm not." I wiped the authentication servers, destroyed the backup drives. The money exists. But it's locked in a digital vault that can never be opened. It'll sit there forever, untouchable, frozen in time, like a monument to everything you threw away. "That's insane. That's our money." "Your money. It was never our money, Marcus. It was blood money. Money stolen from people who couldn't fight back. Money earned by threatening families, corrupting justice, destroying lives. I helped you build that fortune, and I'm making sure it can never be used again. By anyone." I pulled my weapon, aimed it directly at her chest. My hand was shaking. "I could kill you right now, right here, dump your body in the river and walk away. Yes, you could." Elena didn't even flinch. "But then what?" "The money is still gone. Danny and the others are still cooperating with the FBI. The Russians still own your territory. Killing me doesn't change any of that. It just makes you a murderer without an empire instead of a criminal without one. You took everything from me." "No, Marcus, I stopped enabling you. There's a difference." She took another step closer, close enough now that the barrel was inches from her sternum. "For 8 years, I made excuses for you. I told myself you were a good man in a bad business, that you protected the neighborhood, that you had honor, but you didn't. You were just a narcissist with a gun who happened to marry someone smart enough to make you seem more dangerous than you actually were. Shut up. The truth is, without me, you're nothing. You never learned the business because I always handled the details. You never built real loyalty because I managed all the relationships. You never had to be smart because I was smart for you. And now that I'm gone, everyone can see you for what you really are. A thug. Brutal, yes. Scary, maybe. But ultimately, replaceable. My finger tightened on the trigger. One squeeze. That's all it would take. Do it, Elena whispered. Pull the trigger. Prove to both of us that violence is all you have left, that I was right to walk away, that you never deserved the empire I built for you. I stood there, weapon raised, staring into the eyes of the woman who'd systematically destroyed my life, and realized that even now, even here, she was still 3 moves ahead. If I killed her, I proved her right, proved I was nothing but violence without strategy. If I didn't kill her, I proved I was weak. She'd engineered a scenario where both choices were losses. I lowered the weapon. Elena's expression softened just slightly. There's a car waiting for you, 3 blocks south, keys in the ignition. It'll take you to the Canadian border. You have maybe 6 hours before the FBI figures out where you are. Run, Marcus, disappear, start over somewhere far away from here. And if I don't? Then at noon I make a phone call and federal agents arrest you for Kellerman murder, plus 14 other felonies. You'll die in prison. Alone. Forgotten. She paused. Or you can run and at least keep your freedom. You'd let me go? Just like that? I don't want you dead, Marcus. I never did. I just wanted you to understand what it feels like to lose everything you took for granted. She turned back toward the water. Now go, before I change my mind about being merciful. I stood there for another moment, then turned and walked away. Behind me I heard Elena's voice, soft and final. Goodbye, Marcus. I hope whoever you become next is better than who you were with me. I didn't look back. Because if I did, I knew I'd see the truth written on her face. She'd won. Completely and absolutely. And there was nothing left to do but run. I made it 2 blocks before I heard the sirens. They came from every direction at once. Federal vehicles with lights blazing. Tires screeching as they boxed me in on the empty industrial street. 12 agents poured out with weapons drawn, shouting commands that blurred together into white noise. I could have reached for my weapon, could have gone out in a blaze of gunfire like the old bosses did in the stories, but my hand didn't move. It just hung at my side, heavy and useless. Marcus Vaughn, you're under arrest for the murder of Marcus Kellerman and conspiracy to commit racketeering money laundering. And the rest of the charges faded into background noise. My eyes scanned the scene as they cuffed me, and I saw her. Elena standing across the street in the small crowd that had gathered to watch. She wore sunglasses and a baseball cap, anonymous in the morning light. But I'd know that posture anywhere the way she stood with her weight slightly on one hip, arms crossed, watching with the clinical detachment of someone observing an experiment's results. Our eyes met for just a moment. She didn't smile. Didn't gloat. She simply nodded once, a small acknowledgement that could have meant anything. Goodbye. I told you so. This is what you made me become. Then she reached into her coat and pulled something out. Held it up so I could see it, even from across the street. A badge. FBI credentials gleaming in the morning sun. And in that moment everything clicked into place. Every Tuesday night charity meeting. Every monthly trip to Manhattan. Every question she'd asked. Every system she'd built, every relationship she'd cultivated. Elena wasn't just my wife leaving me. Elena was a federal agent who'd spent 3 years undercover in my organization, documenting every crime, every bribe, every murder. Building a case so airtight that even my best lawyers couldn't find a crack. She'd married me as an assignment. Had shared my bed for 3 years while wearing a wire. Had built my empire specifically so she could tear it down. And I'd been so arrogant, so convinced of my own power that I never saw it coming. Never even suspected that the quiet woman making my coffee and managing my calendar was actually the most dangerous person I'd ever met. The FBI agent in the passenger seat turned back to look at me. We got a solid case, Vaughn. 4 of your guys already flipped. Danny gave us everything. The Kellerman murder, the bribes, the offshore accounts. Your wife made sure we had enough evidence to put you away for life." "Ex-wife," I said quietly. I didn't know why that distinction mattered, but it did. "Not technically, you're still married, but I doubt she'll be visiting you in prison." The agent paused. "You know, we've been investigating your organization for 6 years. Could never make anything stick. Witnesses disappeared, evidence vanished, judges threw out cases. Then 3 weeks ago, we get an anonymous tip with a complete breakdown of your operation. Bank accounts, shell companies, political connections, everything. Gift-trapped with documentation we'd need years to compile. 3 weeks. Elena had been planning this for at least 3 weeks, maybe longer. While I'd been sleeping next to her, while she'd been serving me coffee and managing my calendar and smiling at my associates, she'd been building the cage that would hold me for the rest of my life. "She's something else, your wife," the agent continued. "We tried to track her down to offer witness protection, but she disappeared. No phone records, no credit card usage, no paper trail at all. It's like she never existed. That's because she'd been a ghost all along. I just hadn't realized it. She'd moved through my world without leaving fingerprints, managing my empire while remaining invisible in every record, every photograph, every piece of evidence. The perfect position for someone planning to dismantle everything from the inside. The drive to the federal courthouse took 40 minutes. By the time we arrived, news vans had already gathered. Marcus Vaughn, the feared Mafia boss of New Jersey, being led in handcuffs up courthouse steps. The image would be on every news channel by evening. My lawyer, a public defender, since my accounts were frozen and my private attorneys had all dropped me, met me in holding. The young kid looked fresh out of law school, clearly overwhelmed by the scope of the charges. "Mr. Vaughn, I'm going to be honest with you. The evidence against you is overwhelming. 4 cooperating witnesses, financial records, recorded conversations. Your best option is to take a plea deal, probably looking at 25 to 30 years. 25 to 30 years. I'd be 70 when I got out, if I lived that long. Most men didn't survive that kind of time. There's one other thing," the lawyer said, pulling out a document. "This arrived this morning, divorce papers already signed by your wife. She's requesting nothing, no alimony, no assets, no claims to anything. She just wants the marriage dissolved." I looked at the papers. Elena's signature at the bottom, elegant and final. Dissolving 8 years like they'd never happened. I signed without reading the rest. What was the point? She was already gone and I was already buried. That night, alone in a federal holding cell, I thought about 21 missed calls. About a woman who'd called and called and called, giving me chance after chance to choose differently. To come home. To prove she mattered more than whatever was between Sienna's legs. I'd ignored every single one. And in the silence that followed, Elena had transformed from an invisible wife into an unstoppable force. She'd proven that you didn't need to be loud to be powerful. Didn't need to threaten to be dangerous. Didn't need to be seen to control everything. The silence of a strategist, it turned out, was louder than the roar of any boss. I'd spent my life making noise, shouting orders, making threats, demanding respect through fear. Elena had spent hers moving quietly, building systems, creating dependencies, making herself indispensable while remaining invisible. When she finally spoke through her actions rather than words, the sound was deafening. Somewhere out there, Elena was living a new life, a free life. A life without the weight of a man who'd taken her for granted. She'd probably changed her name again, changed her appearance, slipped into a new identity as easily as changing clothes. Maybe she was still FBI. Maybe she'd moved on to another assignment, another criminal, another long game. I'd never find her. The FBI would never find her. She'd become what she'd always been, a ghost. But this time by choice. And I'd become exactly what Elena had always seen me as, a man who'd built nothing, controlled nothing, and deserved nothing. Just violence and arrogance wrapped in an expensive suit. The cell door clanged shut with a finality that echoed through the empty corridor. I laid down on the thin mattress and stared at the ceiling, counting the years I'd lost because I'd been too arrogant to appreciate the woman who'd made me a king. 21 missed calls. That's all it had taken to topple an empire. Elena had tried to warn me. She'd reached out 21 times, giving me every opportunity to choose her over my mistress, my ego, my destructive pride. I'd chosen wrong. And now I'd spend the rest of my life in a 6x8 cell, haunted by the ghost of a woman who'd been there all along, holding everything together with invisible threads. So tell me, was Elena an avenging wife or a federal agent doing her job? Was this betrayal or justice? Drop your thoughts below. And if you stayed until the end, if this story grabbed you by the throat and didn't let go, subscribe. Because trust me, the next story, the next wife who goes silent and disappears, she's going to make Elena look merciful. And I think you're ready for that darkness. I'd learned the hardest lesson of my life: power without respect is just noise. And noise, no matter how loud, eventually fades to silence. Real power was knowing when to be quiet and when to strike. Elena had mastered both. And I never saw her coming until it was far too late. Until everything I'd built, everything I'd thought was mine, had been revealed as borrowed time. Borrowed from a woman who'd been patient enough to let me think I was in control, right up until the moment she proved I never was.